Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told, out of Voice of Radio. So today, we need to take a little bit of a look at the deck that went and won the Players' Cup. Now, for those of you that weren't paying too much attention, the Players' Cup was basically a very large online international tournament. And they took the top 256 players from North America, from Europe, and from Latin America, and the top 128 from Oceania, and they stuck them in a big online tournament to see who would be the winner. I know it is not a perfect tournament. We all know that there's no such thing as a perfect online tournament, at least at this stage, but it was still a giant international tournament that was entered by thousands of people, and you know what? This makes it one of the most, if not the most, impressive win this year. And congratulations to Jack Miller, who did go and take home the crown with Zacian, Lucario, and Melmetal. Yeah, that's right. You see, we were all expecting Zacian to be one of the very best decks this year, this format. This was, interestingly enough, it was both post-rotation and it was with Darkness Ablaze Legal, the first proper tournament we'd seen with that format. And we expected Zacian to be good, but we expected it to be good with Arceus and Dialga and Palkia. And if we take a look at this graphic, now it's not my graphic, it was made by Pokémon, it was included in the broadcast they did, but we can see that the most played deck, and there were only 16 people in the finals, they'd had to go through a heck of a qualification to get there, but there were only 16 people in the finals. But in the finals, the most played deck, by a bit of a margin, was Arceus, Dialga and Palkia and Zacian V. So what made the Lucario and Melmetal build so gosh darn good? Well, Zacian is the same as it's always been. You got the ability Intrepid Sword, lets you draw 3 cards, and if any of them are Metal Energy, you attach them to Zacian. Yeah, sure, it ends your turn, but it gives you extra consistency. And honestly, it's just really, really good for either giving you something to do in the early game before you set up, or for accelerating energy on. We've then got free energy 230 damage, which is pretty gosh darn good, and you're left with a very, very nice deck. The reason we play it with Lucario and Melmetal is for the bulk. You see, one of the cards we play, and we're going slightly out of order here, but I'm sorry, it's kind of got to be done. We play Metal Frying Pan. It reduces damage done to you by 30, while also meaning your opponent cannot drop any damage counters on you. So you also use Lucario and Melmetal. Now, it's largely here for the GX attack. The GX attack says that for the rest of the game, all of your Metal Pokemon take 30 less damage from attacks. Now, there is actually a very nice second bit there. If there's a second energy on, you also discard all the energy from the active Pokemon. So, for instance, if an ADP had gone and used their GX attack, you can both reduce damage by 30 for the rest of the game and get rid of all their energy to hurt them. Or you can get rid of all the energy from a Zacian, or if there is a Center Scorch, you can get rid of all the energy from them, though we have a much better option. We'll get there in a moment. So that's kind of cool. As for the attacks, I mean, we do see them be used. They are fine. We've got 2 energy, 50 damage attach and metal from your deck to this. And then 4 energy, 150. We're not generally playing Lucario and Melmetal as an attacker, but it's there as an attacker if we need it, if we get a little bit desperate. But it's the other 2 Pokemon that really set this deck apart. It played Zamazenta. Why did it play Zamazenta? Because Zamazenta's got that ability that prevents all damage done to it by Pokemon VMAX. And we finally got into the stage where Pokemon VMAXs are really, really good. Of the 6 decks represented at the Players' Cup Finals, we saw 1 copy of Inteleon VMAX, we saw 2 Centiskorch VMAX, and we saw 4 Eternatus VMAX. We finally got to the stage where VMAX decks were very, very good and very, very represented. And honestly, this is really good against them. We'll probably do a video more about this later on in a few days' time. But the general rule is that yes, Eternatus can attack, but Eternatus is not a great attacker against a Zamazenta. It takes 4 energy to do 120 damage. Bearing in mind, when you've got both Metal Goggles and Lucario and Melmetal's GX attack rolling, it's 4 energy, 60 damage. You're unlikely to be winning the game that way, especially given the Zamazenta 2-hit KOs. Zamazenta's attack, I should add, does 3 energy, 130, and discard a special energy, which could be relevant. Special energy is kind of big at the moment. People are running around playing stuff like Capture Energy, for instance. So, you know, quite fun against that. And the thing is, you know, you can see that against Inteleon as well. You block Inteleon VMAX out of the deck, or out of the game, so your opponent has got to attack with Inteleon V. But Inteleon V is just not quite good enough. 3 energy, 130, but again, it's really 3 energy, 70 if everything's working. Not to mention that Zacian can get a 1-hit KO on Eternatus, on Inteleon. And then you can go right back to blocking with Zamazenta. Zamazenta, in a format where VMAXs are being played, which we've not really had until now, but in a format where VMAXs are being played, Zamazenta becomes a little bit ridiculously over the top good. And the last Pokemon we saw being played here was Bronzong. Bronzong was a ridiculous tech we all should have been talking about more, and I'm going to make a video going through this in a lot more detail in the not too distant future. But basically, Bronzong has got an ability, Heat Proof, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's fire Pokemon. And against a Center Scorch deck, they're just not playing any non-fire Pokemon. They might be playing Heatran, and they're almost certainly playing that Volcanion from Unbroken Bonds. Some of them we saw at the weekend playing Victini V. But we didn't see them playing non-fire Pokemon. And Jack did actually play both of the Center Scorch as he went through the winner's bracket. And what we basically saw was he got Bronzong out and just passed the game until he won. He could have been doing 70 for 3 energy and confusion, but didn't need to. Just get Bronzong out and just pass. Because your opponent cannot attack and they cannot win. Although again, if you want to win a bit faster and your opponent isn't scooping, by all means use the attack. But Bronzong basically takes these fire decks from an auto loss to an auto win, unless they're playing some non-fire Pokemon or something that can attack through the ability. Brilliant, brilliant tech. And it's really worth bearing in mind here that the Bronzor's got a really awesome ability whereby you can evolve on your first turn going second. And this is huge, because it means either you go first and your opponent has got literally one turn, their very first turn, to try and KO it using a boss's orders, assuming it's on the bench. But they've got to get their attacker and all without using any other supporter, and that's super awkward. Or you go second, and your opponent's had one turn where they can't attack, and you can just immediately evolve up and start blocking them. So the Bronzor here, genuinely, really, really useful. Rather a handy bonus, I might say. And that's your Pokemon line. You've got Zacian as your main attacker, Lucario and Melmetal to reduce damage done to you, Zamazenta to take care of the VMAXs, and Bronzong to basically auto-win the fire matchup. And this gives you a really good attacker that is not taking much damage, while also giving you basically auto-wins against some of the best decks around at the moment. It's a bit ridiculous. Now, obviously, in terms of energy, we're just playing Metal Energy. There are 13, if anyone's wondering, but we're playing stuff like Metal Saucer to accelerate the Metal Energy, and Zacian's ability can only accelerate basic Metal Energy, so clearly here, basic Metal is the way to go. Now, in terms of the trainer cards here, there are a few we've already mentioned. Metal Saucer to accelerate energy is pretty gosh darn huge to get your attackers online, and Metal Goggles is great, especially when combined with Lucario and Melmetal's attack. You're taking 60 less damage from each attack. And then while we're going along here, we might as well play a couple copies of Mallow and Lana, because Mallow and Lana lets you switch and heal 120. That's pretty good healing. And then we play Cynthia and Caitlyn, lets you recover a supporter while drawing 3 cards. So again, it's really nice both for drawing and getting supporters back, like Mallow and Lana, though it obviously doesn't have to be. And given that we're relying on a tag team and we're playing 2 different tag team supporters, clearly a couple copies of Tag Call, or free copies, letting us search for 2 in combination of tag team supporters and Pokémon, seems like a pretty gosh darned good idea. Elsewhere in supporters, we see what we would expect. Our draw cards are Professor's Research and Marnie. They are the best draw cards around at the moment. Professor's Research discards your hand and draws 7. Marnie makes both players shuffle their hand and put them on the bottom of their deck. You get 5 cards, your opponent gets 4. Okay, that sounds pretty good. And they are very, very standard in like every deck at the moment. We then also see a couple copies of Boss's Orders, lets you drag your opponent's Pokemon from the bench in the active so you can KO them. It becomes pretty gosh darned important. Outside of that, we got 4 copies of Quick Pull, because the vast majority of your deck is basic Pokemon, and 4 copies of Pokemon Communication, which is, I mean, it can get your basics, but it's largely there for Bronzong. Again, if you're against one of these fire decks, you only win if you can get Bronzong out in the first couple of turns, because otherwise you've got to bench a bunch of Pokemon so you don't get benched. You run out of Pokemon to lose. But then your opponent's taking prizes while you do, and most of your Pokemon are 2 or 3 prize Pokemon. Or your opponent knocks out all of your Bronzor, and then you can't win, you can't get your Bronzong out. This has an horrific fire matchup until you get Bronzong out, in which case it becomes a basically auto-win, depending on the fire build, of course. But at the weekend with the Center Scorch games, it was literal auto-win. So you need to play something to get them out. And then we've just got 4 copies of Switch to make sure we got the right Pokemon in the active at the right time. Do bear in mind that when Zacian attacks, it cannot attack next turn. So having a Switch so you can actually use an attack might be kind of important. One more shout out to Jack Miller for winning with this deck. It's a ridiculously good deck. It was a great metagame call, and it's got to be one of the early front runners moving forward into the new format. Yeah, fine, Bronzong's not that great against non-fire decks, and yeah, sure, Zamazenta's not that great against non-VMAX decks. But even then, you've still got a very beefy, hard to KO Zacian, and this is something that's going to get very, very awkward very, very quickly. It is not what most people thought was going to win the tournament. But having said that, I've told you a few times that the only Zacian in top 16 of Japan's unofficial nationals, when Darkness Ablaze was legal, was Zacian with Lucario and Melmetal, so maybe we could have seen this coming. Either way, this is a ridiculously great deck and I love it, but I'd like to know what you think. So let me know in the comments section, would you? Go nuts, be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.